Hello, and welcome to Polyvagal Informed Productivity. I'm Jessica Zorman, a registered psychotherapist, and I work primarily with people who have been diagnosed with ADHD. I've been working with this neurodivergent population for almost 10 years now, and when I first learned about polyvagal theory, something clicked for me. Polyvagal theory is very relevant in the context of productivity, especially when people have challenges with being able to manage time and follow through. It's exciting for me because it explains why we do things that don't seem to make sense on the surface. If you know anyone with ADHD or if you have ADHD, you've probably experienced some version of this. I know what I need to do, I just can't bring myself to do it. It's a heaviness that comes from being overwhelmed. You still know how to read and write, and you're physically capable of typing, but you just can't bring yourself to respond to that email or text message. It's like a paralysis of sorts. And this is often misinterpreted as laziness or not caring. The shame and guilt then weigh even more heavily, which contributes even more to that paralysis. Polyvagal theory offers a compelling explanation for this. It explains what happens in our brains and bodies under conditions of perceived safety and perceived threat. Jan Winhall's felt sense polyvagal model very elegantly illustrates the main nervous system response states and what happens in each. I've adapted it slightly to make it easier for people with executive functioning challenges to grasp the main concepts by translating each of the main and mixed nervous system states into colors. Let me show you how this works. If we perceive danger, our sympathetic nervous system mobilizes us to engage. This is one of the main nervous system responses that enables us to either fight or run away. But in either case, we're moving our bodies. If we're feeling safe, our parasympathetic nervous system kicks in, which allows us to slow down, relax, to engage with others, and rest and digest. For a long time, researchers thought of our autonomic nervous system along these two main pathways: activation in the sympathetic nervous system when we perceived threat, or activation in the parasympathetic nervous system when we felt safe. But Dr. Stephen Porges discovered another pathway. It belongs to the parasympathetic nervous system, just like the yellow, which slows us down, but it activates in response to cues of threat. It's an immobilizing response to threat, a shutting down when we know we probably wouldn't succeed if we tried to fight or run away. It's a very adaptive response in specific situations, like the possum that plays dead to avoid being attacked by a predator. Humans have a similar shutting down response that most often looks like dissociation. So, to summarize the three main nervous system responses, the top two nervous system states, red and blue, are opposite responses, but both in response to cues of threat. The yellow nervous system state is our nervous system's response to cues of safety. Dr. Porges also described mixed nervous system states, and this is where the color wheel shows this relationship really well. In between an activated sympathetic response and a calming parasympathetic response, we get a mixed state that Jan calls fun or fired up. In this state, we still feel safe, but are more activated. We usually experience this state in our nervous system while playing sports or advocating for something that's important to us. It's usually fun, but there might be anger or frustration sometimes in this state. The difference is that we still feel regulated and connected to others. Similarly, in between blue and yellow, we have green. This is still in response to cues of safety, but less mobilized. Here, we might be cuddling with a loved one or a pet. We feel safe and connected, but are not moving much. Lastly, in purple, we experience a frozen state, where we feel highly activated on the inside, but immobilized at the same time. What's important to note is that these are all adaptive responses. Depending on the situation, each of these nervous system states can be useful and has ensured the survival of our species. Where they start to feel less useful is when we are unable to move flexibly in between these states in a real time response to our external circumstances. Executive functioning challenges affect this ability to be flexible. So, if you have executive functioning challenges, it is harder to regulate. And like the chicken and egg, our nervous system's response to threat also deprioritizes executive functioning. It's not adaptive to take too much time thinking and planning in an emergency. Reactivity is much more valuable in this state. Some people will say that they're very good under pressure. And it's true. You will find many exceptional emergency room doctors, first responders, and litigation lawyers with ADHD. I will argue that we can still do incredible things in the red state, but the process is very narrowly focused and does not take long term consequences into consideration. We are more effective with consistency and long term planning in the orange or yellow nervous system states. It's also physiologically not sustainable to keep using urgency to get things done. With prolonged stress, we hit exhaustion and our nervous system inevitably tips into purple. Purple is where we find a lot of challenges with productivity. It's a tortured state because we're still aware of the looming to do list slowly crushing us, but we don't feel capable of taking any action. We're immobilized, like the experience of paralysis I spoke about earlier. What I hope to highlight first is that inaction is not a reflection of someone's character or a lack of discipline. It's almost always the body's adaptive response to a stressful situation. And using aggression, guilt, or shaming strategies might work to activate us temporarily, but in the long term, they lock us into frozen or disconnected states. Understanding this, we can work with the body and brain to find more nuanced strategies to help people move toward their goals. James Clear's very practical strategies will work much better immediately after or in conjunction with a strategy that shifts us out of the red. So, how will this help me manage my time? As you know, we cannot directly control time. The sun will rise and set regardless of how ready we feel for the next day. What we need to manage instead is the intense response in our body that comes with the tasks and tools we have negative associations with, while simultaneously supporting our executive functions with simple external tools. Our nervous systems respond really well to experiential techniques found in focusing oriented therapy and internal family systems therapy. And while we can train our executive functions to be stronger, the first step is to support them with external supports, like a simple notebook and calendar that you use consistently. One last thing I'll mention is that polyvagal theory emphasizes that we are social creatures, and our nervous systems and executive functions benefit greatly from safe and pleasant social interactions. Body doubling is a well known ADHD strategy to get things done, and it's an important and sometimes overlooked intervention for both nervous system regulation and executive functioning support. And that's why I created this group course. I look forward to sharing more with you in Polyvagal Informed Productivity.